All right, everyone, welcome and thank you so much for listening. I am super excited. We have Brian Whitaker here today, who is a professor at the Appalachian State University, and he is also co-founder and director of Immersive Learning at, tell me again, Brian, because I don't want to pronounce it wrong.
It's quirky.
Quirky, perfect. I thought so, and I'm like, I'm going to butcher this.
Right? We get different pronunciations, but yeah, we zero in on quirky.
Awesome. I love it. It sounds fun and exciting, and it makes me curious to learn more about it. So I am super excited to talk to you today about the immersive learning piece of it all. You know, you don't just come out and say, hey, I'm a safety consultant, or this is the work. The learning, the education behind it all. I'd love to just pick your brain about that. So first of all, just welcome. And first of all, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I really am. I feel like once we turn the corner in 2021, each week has gotten progressively better.
Yes.
Right. So we're kind of have like, this is way, way better than it was this time last year. Right.
That's a great perspective. I'm always thinking the same thing as what was happening this month last year. Okay, this is a good month. We're off to a good start.
You use 2020 as a benchmark for anything. Suddenly everything you're doing now is better.
Yeah, no, that's a good right? Life perspective. Absolutely. And so what are you doing today that you're super excited about and passionate about? What do you have in your sleep? What are you doing?
Well, I can talk about the immersive stuff, which is extremely cool and extremely timely. I can also talk about, individual projects that we have going on at Quirky. We're doing some really cool stuff, but
about it, yeah.
With the immersive stuff, I don't want this to be a commercial, but I will tell you about some cool stuff that we're doing. But with respect to the immersive technologies, I am really excited about the potential for immersive technologies in the safety space, all the way up and down the ladder. This is not the first time, I'll be honest, that we've been talking about things like virtual reality and 360-degree video and augmented reality. It's not the first time we've done this rodeo before. This is the third time, I think, where we've started to make real inroads into the immersive technologies for sharpening safety competencies. But this time it sure looks like we've got the market penetration, and it's being mass produced, so the cost of the technology is coming down. So we're starting to see it deployed more and more. We're starting to see more and more research attention being paid to it as well, and the results we're getting back from the empirical research is just phenomenal. It's just unbelievable. There are frameworks out there now that have been validated to construct safety programs around using these immersive technologies, and the ROI is just staggering on these things, and for good reason. The more you can immerse someone, the quicker learning just sort of takes hold and hooks in. Right.
Yeah. The more memorable it is, and I loved how you framed that. This isn't the first time that we are talking about AR and virtual reality, but I do feel that shift in our industry, that we're getting closer, and that it's becoming not ooh, cool, that's an awesome feature, but in my mind, because I'm obsessed with training, I'm obsessed with safety in the workplace, is that to me, the future will require this, because that is how us humans are learning and retaining information. Am I right about that? Is that what the research is saying? Is that students will not be able to retain information from a PowerPoint? Since we live differently, we will learn differently. Is that what your philosophy is?
Yeah, without a doubt. So again, the more immersive, the better. And when you're putting these three-dimensional, real-time experiences, it looks and feels like you're there. And some of the more sophisticated types of setups, they can have wind blowing across your face. If you're like a wind turbine installer, right? You're working in the renewable space, right? We can construct experiences now where you're actually up there on a wind turbine and you're feeling wind across your face, right?
This is making me so excited.
Yeah. that's just one side of it, right? I mean, we're talking about at the operator level, right? At the employee level. We're starting to show that these types of technologies are extremely useful at the leadership development level as well. And that's where I'm really excited about it. Yeah. We can
Tell
do
us
some
about that. Yeah. Tell me, like, that hook was like, oh my goodness. What do you mean? What does that look like?
Well, so you're aware of the soft skill space in development, right? We've been trying to figure out the best way to develop these safety leadership soft skills forever.
Yes.
Right. These technologies are extremely, really good for the soft skill types of competencies for leadership. You can put a leader in a situation where they're monitoring an employee out there somewhere, and an employee backs into a fixed object. Right, they're in a vehicle, and they're in a company vehicle, and they back into a fixed object of some kind. We can immediately put a supervisor in a position where they are then coaching that person in three-dimensional space. And we're scoring in real time, right? Whether their responses are accurate or not. And if you get really sophisticated, you can if this is getting a little experimental now, but you can do things like you can track pupil dilation and where their eyes are going, right? So you can start getting an idea what stress responses are, or where, say, in the feedback process they're really starting to get stressed, from a leadership perspective, so that we can train those skills. Right. So, yeah, I mean, it really is a situation where with these technologies, the sky does appear to be the limit. And the research right now is pretty wild west. There's a lot of stuff that's coming out. There are a lot of typologies for leadership development in immersive space. So those paths are starting to be, blazed at this point. But everything that we're showing seems to indicate that, man, this really seems to be the direction that we're going now. But again, these immersive technologies aren't new. I mean, they've been used in the military. They've been used in healthcare for decades now, right? But the price point has gotten to the point where, okay, yeah, we can start deploying this in a lot of different places.
Absolutely. And that, Brian, my brain just exploded. I don't even know where to start, because my excitement for AR and for virtual reality and for bettering the experience in the classroom overall. I'm super excited and passionate about that space. But, I never thought about it the way you just framed it, is the tying the soft skills with the AR and the VR. I never thought about it like that. I never thought that would be maybe even a starting point or an option, is to enhance a communication skill within the leadership team using these types of technologies. That's wow.
Yeah. Well, it also cuts down a lot on the ambiguity with respect to leadership development, right? But the trick, as always, has been, okay, then how do we isolate, define, assess, and develop the leadership skills that are necessary, right? That's where it starts to get a little tricky for most practitioners. Is, okay, what are those leadership skills, right? And if you look at the research literature, which we have many, many times and in great depth, you start to see some commonality across not only what safety leadership researchers are saying, but also what the best practices are out there for some of the safest organizations. I'm thinking like, the UPSs out there, the PepsiCos, AB InBev, places that have spent decades and millions on safety, right? So I think what these guys are finding, all of those companies I just mentioned have gotten some inroads in the immersive space. They're all working on the immersive space right now.
Wow, that is a huge, if you didn't know, now you know.
If you didn't know,
If you didn't know, now you know. And for the safety professionals, for anyone listening that's in leadership and has management, if you now know that this is what the big companies are moving towards, that just, to me, how can you not be looking at your own organization and think, okay, maybe we don't have the technology or the funding right now or the resources right now, but how can we start taking baby steps towards at least starting the conversation around that? So what would be, for some of your clients that are looking to enhance their training experiences, and they're wanting to move towards, maybe some AR, I don't know. What are your clients? What's like a first step that you see them taking?
We still are in this space where they're most of the clients are pretty cautious, right? No one really first adopter, that's just the way it is. So a lot of the companies I just mentioned are making inroads, into VR and the immersive types of stuff. So it's coming. Repeat your question one more time so I can make sure I'm going down the right road here.
Yeah, if you have a client that's just looking to, they know VR is the future, but they're looking to just enhance their training in the right now. They want to do a better job at training.
Yeah.
What is the first step that they can take to move from death by PowerPoint?
Other than death by PowerPoint, right? Yeah. Well, it is, again, a little Wild West right now. It seems that so the way we approach, I'm going to get a long-winded answer here, okay? So the way we approach, the way we come at safety is a little different than the way that most, I think, safety consultants come at safety. It's one of the things that make us quirky, right? It's one of the things that makes us stand out. Okay. We are all trained industrial organizational psychologists, right? So we specialize in learning and development in safety-sensitive industries. And we all come from blue-collar backgrounds, and we've all gravitated to safety as a result of growing up, in that environment. And the way we approach safety it's deeply psychological. Specifically, safety motivation is deeply psychological. People choose to engage or not engage in safe behavior, and that choice is guided by embedded psychological principles, right?
Yes.
Practically speaking, this means for our clients, we construct safety programs and policies that have, these principles in mind, right? Obviously, doesn't matter what we're producing. Doesn't matter if we're just like producing a one-off e-learning module, or if we're doing an enterprise-wide safety culture initiative. We always integrate what the safety research literature says works best. Now, to get to your question, what the research literature suggests works best right now is going to differ by the client's industry, by their equipment, by their specific issues, their pain points. So, in a blanket way, suggesting to a generic client how to get into the immersive technologies it's so ambiguous right now. It's really kind of hard, right? As it stands right now, I think there are applications for, say, 360 video that make more sense than using like AR or fully immersive VR. Okay. If I'm a fleet safety manager, I might think about using 360 video for hazard awareness training, right? Where I simply have someone drive down the road. There's, it's in have you seen 360 video before?
Yes.
Oh God, it's so cool.
It's so freaking cool. I just was introduced to it a few months ago. And so I've been obsessed. So yeah, go ahead.
So it might be a matter of just capturing a few quick sequences of 360 video, then putting some digital overlays on it so that you can turn them into a hazard awareness type of exercise, right? Okay, so there's a bicyclist there. Highlight that bicyclist and say, this is, got to pay attention to this guy. And there's somebody that's kind of speeding through the intersection. Pay attention to that person. So, you can craft this custom-made hazard awareness 360 video, which would cost a fraction of a full-blown VR application would cost, where it's fully digitized, right?
Right.
So again, it's going to differ based on what, the client's budget. There's another factor, right? And also what it is they need help training on, right?
Now, like what's top priority, and if it's hazard recognition. When I saw that first introduction of 360 video, I thought, like, this is the first step. I mean, I don't know of all the options, but I just thought, how could you, after being exposed to that type of experience, how can you not integrate that into your safety?
Right.
How can like morally as a safety professional, I'm thinking, how can we not be interested in this?
It's an absolute no-brainer, especially when you consider the fact that you can plug it right into an LMS, right? You can embed questions, right? Quizzes into these experiences and get scores on those, which go straight to the LMS, right? I mean, so for compliance, just for compliance reporting, they're great to have. But um, early on, all the literature we're seeing seems to indicate that it goes beyond just compliance. It really does seem to help build that culture. You know, people want to come work for companies that signal to them that they care about their safety, right? And these
Yeah.
experiences tend to send those signals. Yep.
Mm. What else in the training space are you really excited about that you're currently working on with with your customers, with companies right now? What are your clients excited about right now?
Hey, you know, one thing that we're really excited about is some work we're doing with a nonprofit client,
Okay.
together for safer roads. Um, so they got a really cool thing going on. I love their vibe and what they're doing. So Together for Safer Roads it's a multinational coalition made up of massive companies that have massive fleets, like some of the companies I just mentioned, Amazon, PepsiCo, Walmart is in there, UPS, right? And the idea here is through Together for Safer Roads, through this coalition, what they've done is they brought Quirky on board to index and sort of catalog all the best practices from these massive companies with regard to fleet safety. The idea being, okay, so we can take all their secrets that they have, spent millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars on, decades on, tons of resources, and we can repackage those, and we can take those best practices and convey them to small to mid-sized fleets.
Okay.
Right? I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but over 90% of the trucks out there on the road come from small to mid-sized fleets, tiny fleets that don't have resources like the big fleets have. Right? They don't have.
Okay.
Do not have money to throw at data collection. They don't have money to throw at leadership development or even employee onboarding and training basics. Right?
Okay.
So with this coalition, we sort of cataloged and indexed their best practices, and we've turned that into a massive organizational safety culture change initiative for these small to mid-sized fleets. And what we're doing with these guys is based on it's a cohort-based model where we're bringing in say 10 fleets at a time, 10 small fleets at a time, right? And we're helping them get telematics installed, right? We're helping them. We're covering costs associated with telematics installation, covering the costs associated with leadership development, safety, train the trainer kinds of activities, operator training at the front line. So it's just a really cool pro-social thing that's being done by Together for Safer Roads. So that's just a really cool thing that's going on. But to answer your question, there's so much stuff, honestly, that's going on in safety right now. I mean, we mentioned immersive stuff, and I kind of talked about this issue with respect to fleet safety. The overwhelming majority of the trucks out there are completely underserved and under-resourced. But
that's a huge statistic that I wasn't aware of, and that's a huge awareness. Wow.
Most people don't, and then when you consider the fact that I'm not going to get this statistic right, I'm pretty sure it's something like 80% of communities get all of their medicines and groceries and just supplies delivered by truck, right? And when you consider the fact that 90% of those trucks come from these tiny fleets that just don't have any resources to throw at safety, right? You start to think to yourself, yeah, there's some room for improvement here, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And globally, this comes out. TSR, Together for Safer Roads, their mission came out of the United Nations Decade of Road Safety, which is still kind of ongoing, right? The idea being, we want to put a dent in the 1.2 million deaths that occur on roadways every year.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So these bigs, are stepping up and saying, we have all these best practices. Can we share some of this stuff? So again, it's just a very super cool thing that's going on.
Something really interesting that you mentioned is just how Quirky is founded by the leadership team or the founders. You all have the same experience and philosophy and perspective on safety.
Yeah.
Did I hear you right? Coming from boots on the ground, coming from operations, then the safety piece comes into it, and the love for safety. It wasn't, just safety at first. And so what is another philosophy that your company has around safety? You mentioned one philosophy about training, but what else do you believe in that's a little bit different than, say, the industry standard?
Oh boy. Well,
it sounds like you guys are disruptors, and you think
that's another thing that sort of makes us quirky. We do tend to stand out a little bit just because of the way we think and the unique background and experience and education we have. I would say that one of our key philosophies is that we really try to educate our clients on adopting a systems mindset. Right? So let me think, do I want to tie in the other question you asked? Yeah. So when we look through the research literature and we try to identify themes for what safety leadership is so that we can then develop that, right, for our clients, again, we tend to see some common themes. And probably the most dominant theme we see is this idea of fairness or justice in the workplace. I mean, there's nothing that keys employees in to, whether or not they're in the good graces of the powerful, like whether or not they feel like they're being treated fairly, right? And people decide if they're going to engage in safety behavior based on how fairly they're treated. So one of the key sort of philosophies that we live by is trying to make the case to our clients that you really want to adopt a systems mindset. Anytime you have an unsafe behavior that occurs on the job, anytime, there are almost always precursors to that unsafe behavior that lie outside the control of the person that committed the unsafe behavior.
I completely agree. Thinking of just the flashback of all the incidents that I've worked on, sure. I could completely agree with that. All right.
Yeah. So what we try to convince our clients is in their best interest is adopting that mindset, maybe adopting, a framework for analyzing whatever accidents or crashes or whatever the incidents are. For instance, they might use, have you heard of the human factors accident classification? Okay.
Yeah, so yes.
We might, if a client, likes that, there are a number of those types of, frameworks. If a client likes the HVACs framework and feels like it might, do some good there, then we can help them, apply that so that they can, if a crash happens, right, then we can help them figure out, okay, was that a skill-based error or decision-based error? Then we can help them trace that back through the preconditions. Okay, what happened, at frontline supervision? Was there something that went on there? Okay, what about leadership? What about at the organizational cultural level? Mm-hmm. Because again, overwhelmingly, we see that when something happens, there are usually some indirect errors that occur too. So preaching that, that systems mindset is really key for us, because one of the things that we really try to get our clients to understand is that nobody ever sets out to have an accident. Nobody ever sets out something bad to happen on the job, right? So trying to get some managers, some leadership out of that knee-jerk blame and shame, right, framework is right. And once you adopt that systems mindset, then it just sort of implicitly happens where you're like, oh, okay, yeah, so there are all these precursors and preconditions that lead to that behavior. It's not just that person committing the behavior. Okay, there's some downstream stuff here too that we should pay attention to. Maybe there's some mixed messaging that person's getting and they're rushing on the job, right? So, for us, it's a matter of helping them figure out how to adopt that mindset so that they can come across as more fair to their employees, right? While at the same time holding employees accountable and making sure that those skills, their competencies, their safety competencies are technically sharp.
Absolutely. I love the human approach to an incident or to a system breaking down as one. How can we create, better systems, but how can we create a better human interaction between the team and just keeping people first? Like I love what you're saying, and I completely agree. And so how does what is a typical what does it typically look like for your company to serve a customer? So they're, are they around 100 employees? What industry? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we have some big clients. We have some Fortune 500 clients, but we also have tiny clients, right? And one of the things that we're aware of, we have it locked in, is that it really doesn't matter the client. Psychological principles are psychological principles. Employees are.
Yeah, I just had this conversation the other day. I completely agree with you. What I hear you saying, or tell me if I'm listening to this right, is that also the culture can only be driven as far as the leadership will allow it, right? Whether you're 100 employees, 1,000 employees, 10 employees, does it just ultimately come down to how far the owners or leadership team will let you take that program?
Yeah. Yes, it does. Yeah. Ultimately, you almost can't decouple leadership from culture until you get big, right? Once you get to be a big company, then you start to see leadership and culture kind of coming apart, right? Where the leader and the culture start to drift apart. But when they're small, and smaller companies, they're almost one and the same, right? Almost completely the same thing. Leadership behavior is culture. Culture is leadership behavior, right?
Oh.
And the reason for that is because leadership is everything. Management is everything, right? I mean, everything starts with leadership. Everything starts from an employee perspective, right? Mm-hmm. Management leadership holds the power to hire, to fire, to demote, to promote, to schedule hours, to dole out assignments, right? Make working life, living hell, or make it a good place to be, right? So, I mean, leadership can dole out all the goodies and all the baddies. And because of that, employees are always monitoring for clues about how they're doing in the eyes of the powerful, because that's who decides their outcomes, right?
And how quick? Oh, go ahead.
No, well, I mean, the point that I wanted to make is that it's just undeniable at this point that at its bottom, at the bottom of it, safety behavior is driven by employee personal characteristics like risk aversion and hazard awareness, experience on the job, but also the cues they see in the environment. The cues they see in the environment come from leadership safety behavior, the role modeling they do, and the specific safety systems that they implement. All of these things send signals to employees about how safe that they're going to be because they're seeing the role models, right? They're seeing how they're behaving and how they're talking about it. And if they experience some sort of disconnect between, if leadership is saying one thing and doing another thing, that tends not to be very motivating, right?
Sure. Yeah. How you just broke that down behavior-wise when it comes to the overall culture of an organization makes me think of some previous conversations, guests that we've had on the show that are with larger safety companies. And is interesting because the conversation seems a little bit similar as far as what's newer or a new way of thinking about safety is that for our safety consultant, let's say, is not to go into an organization and do a regulation gap analysis. But what's first is more of a cultural and behavioral analysis to see where the company is at before they even get into the regulation stuff. And so is that where your mind is at too, is when you onboard a customer, are you more interested and curious about their culture first, then regulations? Or tell me, how do you onboard a customer? What does it look like for you to serve a customer?
Yeah. So it's a lot of conversation, right? We don't do anything off the shelf. Nothing. Everything is customized. Because a person's pain points are going to differ by industry and processes and equipment and so on, the workforce and so on and so forth. So everything is necessarily highly prescribed and diagnosed for a given client, right? It's just the way it has to be. So when a client's coming on, there's a lot of conversations, and we are looking for are there the check sheets out there? Are the compliance check sheets floating around? Right? Are they compliant? Okay. So they're compliance minded, right? They know that they got to do these things, but do they also know that there's more to it than that? Because checklists don't really equate to safe behavior or a safety culture. and vice versa. Safety culture
Absolutely. Yes.
the checklists, right? So we spend a lot of time simply getting to know our employees or our clients and getting to know where their issues actually are. It generally does sort of take a while to figure out, okay, you know what, this client is much better served by a new onboarding program, or this client is much better served by a new train-the-trainer program, right? So it does take some effort and some discussion to figure it out. Because we are so steeped in this, and we've been doing this stuff for 20 years now, So there's an art and a science to it, right? That's kind of what consulting is. I don't think we have a specific like onboarding process that we go through, click, but we do have information that we need to extract so that we can make the best diagnosis possible. A lot of talking, a lot of brainstorming, honestly, a lot of, okay, is this going to work here? And can we go back and get a few more of these records and maybe look at some of this data that you have, right? So it does differ client by client, but it's always very thorough.
It sounds like it. And it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong about this, but when you are diagnosing, let's say, a new customer and they're telling you, well, we don't have the best safety culture, we don't know why, we want to go to the next level, and you're trying to figure out, okay, what is this company about? When you start brainstorming recommendations for this company, is it accurate that for the most part, you are maybe making suggestions that are outside of safety role, traditional safety roles, right?
Yeah.
When I'm having these conversations and interviewing different safety companies, I'm realizing that it's not safety culture, it's just culture. What is going on? I love what you said. If there's an incident, we're looking at the behaviors, yes, but we're looking at what system broke. There's and how you have a systematic approach.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. So yeah. I mean, from the leadership perspective, you need someone who's going to be that role model, who's going to walk the walk and talk the talk, who's going to be accountable themselves and transparent themselves, and put in place the right policies and programs with respect to recruiting and attraction and selection and performance management, so on and so forth. They need to put those aligned processes in place. And then you drop down a level, right? Maybe at unit level leadership, they're going to be there to make sure that those policies and programs remain aligned and that they're getting the effectiveness and efficiency out of them that they need, while top leadership is acting as the role models, right? The mid-managers are acting as the aligners, making sure that those policies and programs that are in place are doing what they're supposed to do, right? So oftentimes it is a matter of having some conversations to figure out where the weak link is and how something might need to get tweaked or realigned or just simply updated sometimes. Yeah.
And it not just, what I'm hearing you say too is that it's not to go to the next level culture-wise for a company. It's not the safety department. It's not going to just be the safety department that's like humorous. Like it really is a collaboration between operations, leadership, and safety to all cohesively align with the same with the same idea, and that's how you'll get a company to shift.
Yes, without a doubt. I've done this a couple of times now, where I've talked clients into going and talking to their marketing department, right, about securing funds for safety, because safety does become a marketing issue. It goes a long way in terms of attracting the right kind of applicants, and it goes a long way in terms of public perception of your company as well. So there's a huge marketing angle, and generally speaking, marketing always has way more money than safety's got.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's quite a bit of, client education that has to happen sometimes, and you have to help them get to where they need to be. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. What are some final thoughts that you have? Anything that you're up to? You're up to a lot, it sounds like, and you have a lot of fun and exciting
really cool stuff going on. I think it's a really great time to be getting into safety right now. I think that this is really kind of blowing up. It's really up and coming right now. I'm seeing more and more people from my neck of the woods, the industrial organizational psychologists, coming into this field, which is great. I think I mentioned at some point that, employee motivation is employee motivation, right? And psychological principles are psychological principles. We could take these things and go to any industry, right? We could help bankers, be better bankers. We could help insurance salesmen sell more insurance, but this is far more gratifying. Right? This is far more gratifying for us to see accident numbers go down, to see deaths go down, right? Our client issues become less severe, right? It's hugely gratifying for us. So I think that we're going to see more of that. I'm excited more for more psychology in the safety arena. I think that's been sorely needed for a long time. Obviously, we mentioned the immersive stuff and the VR stuff, which is unstoppable at this point. The genie's out of the bottle, right? Yeah. So that's coming. I think we're going to see much more. I think we're going to see more companies leaning into safety leadership development than we have in the past. At this point, we really spend a lot of time thinking about and engineering out issues at the operator or frontline level. Okay. I think we're that attention up the hierarchy now, and because so many more companies are engaging in mergers and acquisitions now, vendor management is becoming a much big. For example, in construction, those responsible bidder laws. Have you heard about those in construction?
What was interesting is that we were primarily pre-COVID working with oil and gas companies, and they were enhancing their vendor management. I mean, it was top notch. And now we're working with a lot of construction customers and companies, and it seems like it's a little bit emerging. It wasn't as set in stone that a vendor is looking at their safety program is completely exposed and transparent to all of their subcontractors. So it just seems
right. Right. And you can imagine bringing on, if you're a company that tends to bring like your average, construction operator, where they'll go to some job site in a different city and just hire people locally, right?
Yes.
And
yeah.
You can't quality control your subcontractors with that kind of business model. Right. So vendor management of safety outcomes is getting kind of big. It's a riddle, right? I mean, it's going to be a riddle to unlock it, but it's pretty dang important too.
Absolutely. And we didn't plan this. This is just too ironic that you're mentioning how psychology just aligns perfectly with the mission of safety. And I just interviewed right before you this morning is a psychologist who is working with, his name is Steve Lutz, and he's a psychologist, now a safety professional. And so his perspective on just the human aspect and employee motivation and aligning exactly of what you're talking about, the future is for companies, for organizations, no matter how big, because you're right. It comes down to people and how we think and how we're motivated. So.
Yep. Until the autonomous vehicles take over, right?
Yeah, exactly. When's that? Soon.
I don't think that's a thing we're going to have to really be concerned about for a couple of decades. I really don't see that being an issue.
Yep.
And we're going to have that human element for quite a while still.
Oh my gosh. Well, I just glanced at the time and I went over 10 minutes of what I promised you. So I apologize for that.
It's been great.
No, the conversation went by quick. I can't believe that we went this long. So I want to respect your time frame that you gave us. I know you're extremely busy, and I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your perspective, and just, I'd love to continue the conversation because I'm obsessed with AR, VR, the future of safety, the future of education, and, how we're learning is how our workplace obviously needs to catch up with that too. So employees. So I would love to follow up with you and thank you so much. And if anybody has any questions, any follow-up, Brian's contact information will be linked to this podcast. And yeah, thank you so much for being here today.
So much.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening.